Today is the 12th day of the First Lunar Month, Year of the Goat, 1991. This year, I am 74 years old. I want to hand down the history process of how the Dharma Constitution came into the world. Speaking of how Buddhism came into the world, there were many stories and biographies that need to be recorded for future reference. In the next generations, those who are drawn to the Buddhist faith, who wish to learn about Buddhism and have an affinity for it, each may freely choose the path that suits them. Only by cultivating the way that aligns with oneself can true results be attained. Speaking of how the Dharma Constitution comes into the world, Buddhist practitioners always prepare the structures, arrangements, and plans for all. In fact, I prepared in the beginning period from 1967 to 1970, 1971, also having a large number of Dharma Constitution faithful followers. Their knowledge was quite good. They petitioned to request a decree to legalize the birth of the Dharma Constitution, aiming at popularizing it far and wide. The Dharma Constitution is intended, at its first basic purpose, to guide everyone practicing the Dharma with the result of knowing and seeing at present, and liberation at present, through knowing, seeing, and solving. That is the salvation of suffering in the secular world, which has been entangled without knowing how to escape from it. And now the Dharma Constitution is providing material to solve this. The one who is ahead guides the posterior one to the path of practicing for the Bodhi miraculous fruit, which has been passed down by the world's most venerable for more than 2,000 years. At the beginning of 1971, some devoted brother followers, though not yet fully accomplished, had nonetheless attained a deeper understanding of doctrine and truth than most others at the time. They submitted a petition to the government requesting a decree authorizing the establishment of the Dharma Constitution so that it could be widely disseminated, guiding and supporting people of all backgrounds to practice the Dharma freely and comfortably. At that time, I accepted the establishment of the Dharma Constitution in the world. At that time, when Mr. Nguyen Van Thieu was president, there was a regulation. When requesting the establishment of an association, 5 elders had to be selected. These 5 were chosen in order, each of them being truly elderly, gentle, and possessing fundamental moral virtue as the foundation for representing the organization. They had to be upright, without wrongdoing, with good character, so that they could place their hands in pledge and formally request the decree. After the decree had been obtained and signed, a grand assembly was held. The 5 elders were invited to preside, not by any form of compulsion, but of their own free will. All 5 voluntarily proclaimed the Sangha chief. This event was known as the investiture ceremony of the Dharma Constitution.
At that time, people from all background were present. There could also be more than 1,000 participants involved in its drafting. The brothers submitted a petition and unanimously resolved to exalt me through Te Thaw as the Sangha chief entrusted with upholding the Dharma Constitution.
During the investiture period, I presented a 4-line verse. I said, all people from every class should follow this verse in their Dharma practice. From this age to future ones, it must always be upheld. When the superior and inferior are in harmony, there is peace and goodness. In any assembly where those above and those below are united in harmony, that assembly will naturally dwell in peace and goodness. Investiture for the establishment of the Dharma assembly. They exalted me as the Sangha chief in order to open the Dharma assembly, and thus they must follow my instruction. With a single word, knowing and seeing the Buddha. Once they hear my teaching and truly grasp it in their practice, they will attain the knowing and seeing the Buddha. When fully accomplished, entering the gate of liberation. And when their practice is brought to completion, they will enter the gate of liberation. These are the 4 verses to be preserved for this age and the next ones. When a Dharma Constitution temple is established, the 2 sides of its gate bear this parallel verse. With a single word, knowing and seeing the Buddha. When fully accomplished, entering the gate of liberation. This is a theme for all future generations to rely on, so that the superior and inferior are in harmony. There is peace and goodness. Buddhism values harmony. Where there is harmony, there is understanding. Where there is accord, there is clarity.
At that time, during President Thiau's administration, after submitting an application to the Home Affairs Department, within 1 or 2 months, Prime Minister Tran Tien Kiem signed the decree according to the official directive, granting permission for wide publication of texts and scriptures, dissemination, and Dharma practice.
A Sangha leader may freely choose whichever Dharma practice is most effective. At that time, as I sat and reflected, I realized that when one guides the path of cultivation for all practitioners, one must adapt to the way of life of each group of people in order to truly lead them. Therefore, in this period, I used the Buddha Dharma without leaving the secular world to be enlightened. With this, Dharma practitioners could be either monks and nuns who renounce their families, or lay people who stay in their families, providing that, being in the form of richness, they are not attached to that rich form. Having either good or bad reputation, they do not sulk. Form, sound, scent, taste, touch, and Dharma. When something of these 6 kinds provokes us, stirs our anger, we must keep our temperament from rising up in hatred. That is true Dharma practice. For example, even if one practices vegetarianism or maintains certain forms, but when touched personally or temperamentally, one becomes hateful, behaves wrongly, or acts against the principles of Buddhism, then that practice is not acceptable. Therefore, we must engage with form, sound, scent, taste, touch, and Dharma without becoming defiled by them, so that the Dharma practice becomes easier. Otherwise, in this period, practicing the Dharma also meant renouncing the family. This renunciation is also really good. However, this requirement goes against the reality that most people today simply cannot abandon worldly life. In this time, people must work to earn a living. They must live among other human beings. Because of that, in order to bring an understanding to Dharma practitioners that allows them to sit in meditation regularly, that is why I set forth the principle and objective of the Dharma Constitution. The principle and objective of the Dharma Constitution consist of 3 main points for Dharma practitioners within the Dharma Constitution. First, within oneself, one must build virtue. When one has virtue, then upon hearing the teachings, those teachings are the teachings of the Buddha. If one lacks virtue, yet listens to the teachings and tries to grasp them, then those teachings become the teachings of the devil. A wise person with virtue is truly wise, but wisdom without virtue is the cunning of devils. That is why the essential need in Buddhism is virtue. Therefore, the most essential and important foundation is virtue. So virtue needs to be cultivated first. Doctrine can be developed afterward. Only then can the practice of sitting meditation be deepened, allowing a practitioner to enter into meditation and realize understanding in all directions. Of course, this unfolds differently according to the level of each practitioner. At times, before the decree was issued, starting from 1967, I wandered from place to execute the Dharma. I sowed the Tao Dharma cause in Bingding, where there were quite a large number of followers, then continued to Da Nang, and from there to Hue. When the decree was finally issued, in February 1971, I invited all those whom I had long guided and taught in Dharma practice to return and establish the Dharma Constitution. There was an administrative council, along with members from all levels. There was also an editing poem committee to aid in dissemination, and a ritual committee to offer prayers for peace or blessings to those who wished for them. Ways of practicing the Dharma are offered according to each person's individual inclinations. I never imposed my own preferences or forced anyone to follow a system based solely on what I liked. This is the central purpose of the Dharma Constitution, and that is why our members cherished it greatly. Having the decree from 1971 until 1975, at that time, I saw the situation. I voluntarily assimilated with everyone to temporarily disband the Dharma Association because I could not firmly guide the four followers. Today, seeing a peaceful and favorable opportunity, I would like to speak about the history of the Dharma Constitution so that people may understand it. For those who are practicing a Dharma subject but do not really understand what the subject is or what the way of the subject's practice is, then how can they cultivate it? When one has entered a subject, the knowledge of that subject must become one's specialization in order for him or her to cultivate it. This year I am tired. I have reached the old age of 74. My voice is thus not as clear as before, but my guidance is more rigid, with results that are many times greater than before. This is because Buddhism is not old. The truth doesn't get old. Therefore, all of the four followers who have faith just follow exactly the guidance to practice. I use the same principles and the same guidance of the Buddha. The same guidance means that wherever I myself stumbled, I must teach those who follow to avoid that same stumbling. That is called the same guidance. I say hello to the four followers. I wish for you to generate the Bodhi mind and vow, the great vow following the Bodhisattva conduct, to use form, hearing, scent, taste, touch, Dharma, without being defiled by them. That is the path of the Bodhisattva conduct, the highest rank among all other Dharma subjects. Dear four followers and all true Buddhist disciples, someone asks, what is the Dharma Constitution? I would like to answer this question with the following explanation. Each one who comes into the world, whether in physical form or in manifestation from his seeing, possesses Buddha nature. This Buddha nature is a wholesome, essential nature, free from erroneous passion, fundamentally suchness, and fully capable of realization. That is the Tathagata. However, it is enclosed by the constitution, that is, the consciousness mind, which seals it within the cycle of ambition. Ignorance obscures it, driving human beings insanely confused. If there is no constitution, like a vehicle with a coordinated engine, it is running smoothly. When something becomes clogged, the vehicle begins to jerk and malfunction. The Dharma Constitution path is the same as this. I use means to help all four followers to practice the Dharma in a way that is appropriate to their time and to their circumstances. Only when it is well suited can true cultivation occur. Therefore, the religious path I use is called the Dharma Constitution, which means the Tathagata Constitution. When the constitution is completely dissolved, when obscuring ignorance is eliminated, the enlightenment of the original truth is restored. In this restoration, the Dharma practitioner returns to the Tathagata and enters the present path of awakening, which is the Dharma Constitution, Vietnamese Buddhism. The Dharma Constitution's opinion is that each person takes the Tathagata Constitution as their root. Every person embodies the essential nature of the Tathagata, but because of consciousness constitution, the path of birth and death is formed. Demolishment is then necessary in the Dharma practice. The first is to demolish ignorance, that is, to demolish attachments and doubts, and to transform the mind so that the self-nature, awareness of nature, shines forth. At that time, the being capable of seeing the nature with one's bright mind is achieved. As one's nature is revealed, one's ignorance is also gradually eliminated. As ignorance is eliminated, the constitution is broken. One's constitution, when dissolving, naturally returns to the essential nature, which is called the Tathagata. Therefore, the foundation of the Dharma Constitution is taking the Tathagata Constitution as its direction. This path is called the Dharma Constitution. The Dharma Constitution came into the world from 1971 until 1975, not having many years, then ending. The Dharma Constitution's members, the four followers, could be up to 3,000 Dharma practitioners. One can see that the Dharma Constitution developed very quickly. Because the Dharma Constitution uses form, hearing, scent, taste, touch, Dharma without becoming defiled by them, and the unification of the spiritual path and worldly life, practitioners of the Dharma Constitution can practice either at home, being laypersons, or at a temple, renouncing the family and becoming monks or nuns, providing that they enter form, hearing, scent, taste, touch, Dharma without becoming defiled by them. In life, a male practitioner knows how to fulfill his obligation of being a husband, a father. For a female practitioner, she knows how to fulfill her obligation of being a wife, a mother. That is the practicing path of the Dharma Constitution, using the Buddha Dharma without leaving the secular world to be enlightened. Not using the renunciation of the secular world to be enlightened, staying in the secular world to be enlightened, living together with all to be awakened, not avoiding the secular world. Definitely not. For that reason, there are two ways of practicing the Dharma. From the present position, there are two paths, the path of Dharma flower and the path of Dharma Constitution. The path of Dharma flower is leaving the family and avoiding love, whereas the path of Dharma Constitution is abiding within lay life while remaining undefiled. I would like to present all the pictures on this small screen as follows. The first picture is, to begin with, my mother, Nguyen Thi Phung. The second picture, we are entering the precious Dharma place in Quy Nhon City, Binh Dinh Province. The third picture, the person standing, is Mrs. Nguyen Thi Nghien, whom I would like to introduce as the wife of Mr. Lin Quang Vien, who, at that time, was serving as a lieutenant general in the city of Nha Trang. That was when Mrs. Nguyen Thi Nghia, the wife of Lieutenant General Vien, on a ceremonial occasion went on a pilgrimage journey to Hue. Mrs. Vian led a delegation to Hue for pilgrimage, while at the same time I was traveling to Da Nang. Our two parties met, and they requested permission to attend the ceremony when I arrived in Quy Nhon. All true Buddhist disciples of the Dharma Constitution were invited to return to participate in the ceremony, and at the same time to listen to the Dharma teaching. This is the image of Mrs. Nguyen Thi Nye, standing up, expressing her opinion about the Dharma Constitution that she had the chance to encounter. The Dharma Constitution specializes in doctrine, sitting meditation, and practicing the Buddha path. This association uses no form that could be called politics. She also spoke up about her personal aspiration and appreciation for the Dharma Constitution. This is the photo taken at the time when I went from Nha Trang to Da Nang by a Boeing aircraft on September 9, 1973. Upon arrival, I was received by the 4 followers of Da Nang and escorted to the Dharma Precious Place. The Dharma Precious Place of Da Nang Provincial City was located at the house of Phung Nong, who was a traditional herbal physician and running a medicinal herbs shop. Here is the photo taken when Mr. Ling Quang Vien was about to be transferred to serve as an ambassador to a country whose name I had momentarily forgotten. He hosted a small, intimate farewell meal and invited me to attend, to see him off before he departed overseas to take up his ambassadorial post, near France somewhere, in Morocco, yes, that's right. And the image below shows a pilgrimage. At that time, my wife, Phan Thi Kim In, traveled together with the women of the 4 followers on a pilgrimage to visit temples in Thanh Hoa Province. This is an image of my family sitting. After the ceremony was completed, we gathered together in an intimate, customary family gathering, just as we always do. This image shows me sitting out on the porch of my wooden house. The house is very small, like a hermitage. I would often sit there to enjoy the cool afternoon breeze. That was part of my everyday life, sitting there. I still remember clearly, when I was sitting there taking the picture, that was the year I wrote the book, Under the Appraisal of the Universe and Humanity. I have found out the quintessential substance in the universe. This quintessence is the living substance. If human beings do not have the quintessential substance, they are not in the condition of being nourished by the universe. Nevertheless, humans must have the living substance of quintessence. To my close people, just read the book, Under the Appraisal of the Universe and Humanity, to see my clear explanation about this quintessential substance in more detail. Reading it would be much clearer than if I were to try to summarize it here. This is an image for the purpose of practicing the Dharma, but still developing, such as the cultivating that is taking place in the 2 pictures below. This is so that all Dharma practitioners gain the life of self-reliance, being vigorous in life, not coming into a pagoda to be a Buddha, sitting there and being fed by others. That lifestyle is not suitable to my life. I still struggle and overcome in life. Every disciple of mine is a human standing among other humans, very virtuous. Here is the image of a land plot I was granted, about 30 kilometers from Nha Trang city, called Vinh Phuc, Phu Hu village. That garden was A Day Garden, located at the foot of the mountain. My aspiration was to deforest that place. For what? For later there might be a modest sum to build a hut or a temple to nurture and support brothers and sisters who would come to practice sitting meditation. I say hello to the 4 followers. I wish for you to generate the Bodhi mind and vow, the great vow following the Bodhisattva conduct, to use form, hearing, scent, taste, touch, Dharma, without being defiled by them. That is the path of the Bodhisattva conduct, the highest rank among all other Dharma subjects.